Thank you for tuning in to the Canada Startups video series. In today's video, we will be going over how you can create proper financial statements by first determining and projecting the expenses that your small business may have. Every business is different, and all may have unique expenses that you may have to consider as you start up, grow, or expand. It is important to plan your expenses so that you don't run into any issues or unexpected costs that you're not prepared for. Not to mention, planning for expenses in advance so that you can have the needed capital before you truly need it. So let's take some time together today and see some of the ways to determine your expenses and what they may be. If you have an existing business or are looking to grow, you may already be familiar with the industry and have an idea of what your expenses are. To grow the business, the same expenses will have to be considered, plus new ones may be added on. Half the challenge is determining what these expenses are in the first place. And with an existing business, you already have that sorted out, making it much easier for you. Typically, year over year, business expenses grow as your revenue grows. As the economy changes, inflation rates rise, interest rates go up, and so on. All of these have to factor into projecting ahead with your expenses and the added costs. With a growth of 5 to 15% per year in terms of revenue, it is normal to see a 5 to 10% increase in costs. While some businesses may have larger growth with a larger percentage increase in costs. This is true especially if you are growing and have to invest more money into the business before you see the return on your investment. It is also very normal for a business to not be profitable instantly. If you don't have existing figures to work from, your goal is to project or forecast. Let me show you how that's done. To properly determine the expenses that your business may need, so that it is as close to the real thing as possible, there are a few ways that you can plan for it. Assuming you've done a bit of research into this specific business model, you should be aware of the type of startup expenses you must cover in order to be able to launch. Since business expenses are different for every business, you first have to consider those that are critical to you being able to start. As a contractor in construction, for example, your startup expenses may require that you have a pickup truck, some tools and equipment, perhaps a website, business cards, and a cell phone. All of these are costs, just to get you going. On the other hand, if you are starting a digital business and creating logos and flyers online, your expenses may differ and only include a computer, some subscriptions to design tools or software, perhaps a home office setup, and so on. Once you've determined your initial startup costs that are a must-have just to get to that point, your next goal is to plan your expenses that are ongoing. These will be expenses that you see all the time, usually monthly, like rent payments, utilities, phone bill, internet bill, purchase of inventory, marketing costs, wages, and so on. Again, these depend on your business and may be different from other businesses. If that detailed breakdown isn't something you can do just yet, it simply means that you haven't done the research needed to evaluate your business idea in full just yet. So this next step may be of help. You will want to do a bit of research to determine what the market is like. Who else is doing what you want to be doing? What is their business spending money on? Do they have an office, a storefront, or are they working from home? How do they advertise? Do they do it for free or pay for ads? Do they pay for bus bench ads or spend all of their money online? What type of inventory do they have? What type of tools or equipment do they use? Having access to this type of research can prepare you to know what you can expect as well. Much of this can be applied to help you determine the lows, the averages, and the highs, but it doesn't mean that this will be an accurate representation of your business. So it's important to take it lightly and adjust it towards your own business model. Lastly, you can always work it backward and try to determine your potential first. Once you know how much you can generate in terms of sales revenue, based on the number of customers and dollar volume in sales. You can use that to determine what type of expenses you will need to keep up with that demand. Remember the basic rule. In business, everything has a cost, from the papers to the pens, to computers, to the coffee machine, bookkeeping tools, to the equipment, marketing, people, and so on. But if you know how much you can make, you will know what you need in order to ensure your success. You can from there take the earned revenue and disperse it across the needed costs. Let's take a look at an example together as to how we estimate the costs and plan forward. In this example, let's assume that Frank wants to start a limo service for parties, events, and special occasions. Frank is in a good spot as he already has a limo car ready, but needs help determining the other startup costs to get him ready to go, as well as those ongoing costs that he has to consider. As Frank has the limo, the major and most expensive component of his business model is already in place. However, the other costs that Frank has to consider as he starts up will be having a website to help promote his services, so that customers can find Frank, request a call, and book the service. While a business website isn't mandatory, it is a common practice and one that Frank is willing to get done, at least to help minimize his startup costs of having to pay for ads elsewhere during this initial startup phase. Frank will also need business cards to pass out at local meets, to his clients and others, to build a referral business and returning clientele. Frank also requires business insurance and car insurance before he is on the road. As you start a limo service, or any business for that matter, your personal preference may be considered here as well. Perhaps you want to start with having a built app that your customers can find you on, or perhaps you want to start by hiring a driver and not drive yourself. These changes may change the initial startup costs quite a bit. But on to the operating expenses. To run the business, Frank will need to cover quite a bit. Most importantly, his phone bill, car, and business insurance, the cost of gas, perhaps the rental spot to leave his limo at night, or the weekends, maybe security monitoring for when he is not driving, cleaning services after each drive, any repair and maintenance costs, as well as marketing if Frank wants to grow the business. While these are ongoing costs, they may go up and down in cost each month. Frank may decide to spend more money on marketing during a specific holiday and less right after. This may adjust Frank's ongoing expenses quite a bit. Perhaps Frank can go a full year with no repair costs, or maybe he has hit a few potholes and needs to invest more. All of these are factors to consider as you plan your expenses. It is often a rule of thumb that for every dollar in revenue increase, you should expect up to 50% cost increase. This may be more or less depending on your business model or industry. Other things to consider when projecting expenses would be to project certain expenses based on growth. As your business grows, certain expenses may be going up as well, while some may go down. As Frank's business gets more and more popular and he builds his returning customer base, the cost of marketing may start to go down. With a new vehicle, Frank may also have less repair costs than he would with the older model. All things to consider as you budget and prepare your expenses. At the end of the day, financial projections aren't meant to be easy. They take time to carefully plan out and to evaluate. Take the time you need, apply the best practices, and see for yourself what type of expense you can expect based on these models. If you still have issues or are simply stuck, work with an expert at Canada Startups to determine what type of small business expense you can expect and prepare for as you start up or grow your business. Be sure to also tune into the next video in our financial series, as we will also be going into more detail on some of the hidden costs of starting a small business and how to prepare for them.